Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode number 109 of the CRM Conversations. We are very grateful that you are with us this evening, and we are even more grateful that finally our very special guest, Peter Pirner, is with us, and we are looking forward to a thrilling topic such as we discuss the success of CX management and if there is something one could touch, feel, and measure, and is there even a ROI of those topics we are discussing. And last but not least, we have an ongoing discussion in the community how EX is influencing good CX. And I would love to touch base also on that topic with our honored guest, Peter. But first, a little self-introduction, Peter, by yourself.
Hi. First of all, thank you very much for having me. I'm Peter. I'm 58 years old. I live in Munich and Barcelona. Actually, I work for more than 25 years now in the area of customer experience or insights, or the insights area. I was teaching for several years empirical methods at the University of Munich. Then I worked for 23 years almost at Kantar. This is one of the biggest insights consultancy company in the world. And there I had so many different roles, global, regional, local. I worked actually across all industries. As it is Kantar, you typically work with the bigger clients.
Okay.
Sometimes also, if you work at the local level, you also have medium-sized clients. And after Kantar, I also worked in a startup. So actually, I see also the also the different company sizes and different needs. And actually, what I do now is I work as a independent CX advisor. On a more strategic level, I coach CX managers in their role, which is something I started half a year ago, actually. And I find that really interesting, helping them going on with their work. I also created some sort of training program, which still will be expanded in the Institute of Customer Experience Management. We have a educational program for CX managers, for example. I run one of those modules. And yes, and actually I run also the most successful German podcast on customer experience management, CX Talks. This is my advertising blog right here, but it's in German language. That forms part of the positioning.
You have to repeat the words you threw in, Thomas, as unfortunately one could not listen it.
Okay.
Your comment, repeat it.
Well, we still need to give him, Peter, our account number.
Yes.
Placement ads.
Well, we learn from each other, such as he discussed the opportunity how to do promotion and advertising and how to do it in a smart way, such as you don't work your legs off if you do it clever. And it's interesting to see the follower numbers and the participants, and it's an interesting space. Both of our videocast, podcast are in. And this comes to directly the aspect of, after that short self-introduction, we have the findings that data and customer understanding are linked quite nicely. And to the opposite, ET is phoning home. Yeah, ET is phoning home. And on the other side, there are some guys which still believe, one of my favorite quotes, if you put 10 barrels of smelly stuff and put them together, and you have a big data lake that you get if you put 10 not properly cleaned sources together, you get a perfume. And the opposite is the real aspect. If you go to my cellar, you can have a take of the smell. Yeah. As my neighbor has found not yet the leakage, which is giving me some extra work these days. Yeah? What's your opinion on the data and customer understanding and the linkage between the two, Peter?
As I said, actually, I'm a research mind. I'm an empirical mind. I did that all my life. I was teaching that. I taught that because I was so fascinated as a student. I wanted to continue doing that. And this gives you a certain way of thinking. I always want at least try to find a proof to my hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
And data is the main source to give proof to something, but only if you really understand which kind of data you have. Because there is a binary code, this doesn't mean that gives you an answer to the question you had. And if there are no data in a system, then you probably need to ask someone from outside of the system to give you input. And this is where market research or the insights industry, which has had their focus in the past, now it moves a bit away. So you also try to combine other data. It's not that you just work on a good questionnaire and then doing a lot of empirical voodoo just to tell afterwards a very nice story. Things are getting much more integrated, and also the new generation of researcher on the one, either they are very qualitative, so they are there to tell a story, not having quantitative measures, or they are even more integrated than they were in the past into the CRM systems or process data that are there, and combine all these data with maybe some additional feedback, motivational information you get from clients. So I think data and information.
I applaud your expression of the voodoo. Yeah, I like that one. And would you, by saying that, think that by having all that data, that we really understand what customers think and want? Or do we
There's an interesting, I think we really need to differentiate. I mean, if data is crap, then you cannot understand anything at all. Let's assume the data is good. This does not mean that you have the right insight at the right moment in time.
Yeah.
Because, for example, in my case, I only made fantastic research programs with,
Of course.
with tons of insights. No, there's no exception. No, really, the most frustrating thing for someone who delivered a serious, well-designed piece of empirical work is when nobody gets what he wanted to say. And that's, I think, one of the biggest problems of the industry. Because, I mean, what happened quite often is that if you have a statistician with you, or someone who does not really understand the real issue of the client, then he prefers to tell everybody how he made the research, which leads to the point that nobody understands what the statistic means, is completely confused and thinks what they can learn is not worth anything. And who is this guy, by the way? And if you start to talk, try to really interpret the results, having in mind what was the real issue, what do you really want to answer, then you still have a big problem. Maybe you have a wonderful presentation, everyone said, now I got it. But the decision, which could be informed exactly with this data, is taken only 6 months later. And then they say, well, I had fun at that presentation, but again, what was the outcome? And you created already the insights, but people already forgot that there is already some insight. So whenever I talk to clients, I always say, what do you already have? and then let's check if this is just garbage. Or in many cases, it's not. It's really good. For example, you make a customer segmentation, and this is true in CRM just as much as in classical research, where you have more motivational segmentations. If you make a segmentation, someone said, I want this segmentation for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Someone starts without knowing the purpose, should be fired immediately. But if you start exactly with this purpose, and half a year later, the guy who said, this is the purpose why I want this segmentation, has left. Someone else has the segmentation with fancy names and creates his own story. Then he said, but the segmentation doesn't really work. Sorry, this is optimized for a specific purpose. And maybe we need to readjust all that to recalculate the parameters if you want to optimize it for another purpose. And this is what you really need to know about working with data or with insights. It needs to be at the right moment in time. Don't get frustrated if people forget what they already knew. And for that reason, I would say we have a good chance to know a lot about clients, but we also have a good chance that we forgot what we already knew.
It sounds like it's at least as important to be able to recalculate the data that you already have as it is to collect any particular piece of it.
I would say so, yes, at least with internal data. From my perspective, the biggest problem there is that you really need to be very savvy about what do these internal data really reflect and what not. It's the same like in any statistical analysis with research data. You give a variable a name, but just because you gave a variable a name does not mean that this variable expresses exactly what the name is. So if you recalculate and you know your stuff and you know your data warehouse and you know your data, then you can very professionally adapt what you have to a new situation because you understand what it means. If not, you're just another artist who can calculate, but does not contribute.
Yeah. Well said.
An artist.
Yeah, because actually, if you do data analytics, you are an artist.
Yeah.
And it's not because people do not want to deliver something good. For example, I had endless discussion about the relevance and significance of changes. And I said, look, this is the story. If it would not be significant, for me, the story is still very valid that you should do this. And if you would have a sample size that is 4 times the size, then everything would be significant. A really classical discussions you have as a market researcher. But if you come back to the initial question of what you asked me, this would be my answer. And does that make sense to you? I said, yes. And why don't you just act on it?
Why do you call them artists? They themselves call them data scientists.
Yes.
Nobody gets
I
paid
call
well
them
for
artists
being an
because
artist.
it's an art to make good data analytics. You need to have, as I said, you need to understand the customer problem, the business issue. If you don't get that, you just calculate. If you got that, you need to understand your data. And then there are so many different ways of running analysis that you also need to make a wise decision which analysis you take. And sometimes you apply far too complicated models. I'm a bit afraid of all these AI stuff because then you said the artist is now the machine, and I just interpret afterwards what the machine told me. I'm feeding the machine, yes, but now we give the art in the hands of a self-learning algorithm. What you would learn, you never do. If you really want to create insights, if you want to learn something new, you have an hypothesis and then you test it. And you don't look at data, let a system run analysis, and then say, look, I could see this. This is a bit like reading in coffee in an empty coffee cup. I don't know if this metaphor works, but after 20 years of research, I can tell you a story about any number I see, even if it was created completely wrong, because it's about trying to make the right conclusions. For that reason, I'm not so very much impressed that you can find something just in data. But if you're seriously working on an issue, you have the hypothesis up front, and then you can quite easily understand, no, this does not seem to be the case. And then we just build the next hypothesis. And this is art. We just adapting the hypothesis, trying to be more granular and tell something. And I'm not talking about talking about performance marketing, which is just quick, needs to be fast, it needs to be adaptive, but it's not hypothesis, it's just A/B testing. Is this better or that? That is simple. But if you want to understand motivations of people, if you want to understand statistically, it's simple. The hypothesis is very simple. But if you really want to understand, what do my customers want in 5 years? Why did the needs change over time? Who are the ones where I won the biggest share of wallet, and why? There you have internal data and external data. Then you need to start with an idea who that might be, and then you will soon find out many of those hypotheses do not work. And this is where the insights then is created, because you said, I thought it were them, but actually these are others. Or the decision to have a huge share of wallet is not necessarily linked to their needs, because there might be also some technical reason for that. This is what you can only learn when you have the process data and some insights from the customer. Is that too abstract right now? I don't know. We are already quite...
No, it makes sense to me.
We were in interpretation of coffee sediment and crystal balls and throwing bones. So we have had all the most sophisticated tools at our hands for prognosis. And we have had the interesting aspect of how useful is AI if there is not a human to do the interpretation. Just in my rheinischer Humor words, put it that way. I believe that Marshall was just not only commenting, but had an idea.
Yeah, kind of. It seems to me, I think that's the second time I've used that intro, so I should stop. But one of the most important pieces of equipment that you can have in analytics, as a data analyst, is an office with a window, because you need to be able to look out into the real world and see if what you're collecting and what you are generating from your hypothesis works in the real world. It's like you said, Peter, you with your experience can look at any number or set of figures and tell a story about them, whether they make sense or not. And that speaks to human creativity, and it's wonderful. But it also tells us that if you spend all of your time just looking at the numbers, there's a good chance you're going to miss something.
I think that risk is even higher for these classical data analysts that just work with internal data than a researcher whose job is to ask the outer world what they think about the company and try to translate that back into the world of the company. When it comes to statistics, it's the same. Sometimes you pass it on to modelers, and then they did not have the client interview, they did not have the business issue, and they just calculate in a perfect way. And also in this case, it would be good if they looked out of the window. But the real artists, they look out of the window.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Absolutely true, Christy. Because storytelling is the thing that creates the insights. and the insights creates the impact.
So,
And the impact is what it counts. The impact is actually the impact is what you want to achieve when you get contracted for explain me what customers want. And only if you have an impact in decision making, you can also see an impact in the customer experience management systems.
So where is the connection between data and the story? This is probably where the art starts.
No, I think it's actually there are many people who are very talented to interpret data in a meaningful way for others. And storytelling actually just makes sure these are certain techniques that you can use to keep people interested in a presentation. So it's just the flow of a presentation. I give you an example. If you start your presentation with 15 minutes about the technical prerequisites you had just to make then the story, this is the best way of killing everybody, making everybody falling asleep, and you will not have any impact. But if you tell your story in an interesting way and if you want to have the technical details, I give you that later on, because it's absolutely solid what we did. But what I want you to take away from what I tell you today is, and now I show you why. And now I even maybe show you what we thought it would be and it was not. And then people start, something changed, and people remember much more. But you still have the problem that you can have a brilliant presentation, but the decision is made only 6 months later by people who did not attend the presentation. But I really love this job of bringing data or insights to life, trying to involve people, bring that to their world. And this is something which goes beyond. 40% look like 40% if you tell the story bad or if you tell the story interesting. And I prefer to tell the story a bit more interesting.
Well, yeah, I prefer to listen to interesting stories rather than boring ones.
And by the way, sometimes also the story if, for example, if you have huge trackers and you need to come back every year. I remember I was a huge car manufacturer. I came back 3 years in a row with exactly the same results in the analysis. And I said, hey guys, by the way, actually this starts getting boring, because in reality, what did you do? Because we already noticed what we could do. So we did nothing, because actually this is a partner department, and so actually it was not our responsibility. And why do you listen to that every year? Oh yeah, we like to listen to you. Yeah, but that's not the point. That's really not the point. I get paid for that, but that's not the point. And so we always said we had 3 fantastic workshops. Said yes, this is what we could do. This is what we should do. And this is what we did not do.
Well, you can make things more efficient for yourself then. Just record it and send the recording.
Yeah, copy paste.
Then you don't have so much impact. The impact is if people say, yes, I remember, this is what you said last year, isn't it? Yeah, we really should. It's a bit like it's a bit like, yes, I really should do my tax declaration earlier this year. Yeah, you said that last year. I remember it. And 5 years ago, I know I should do my tax declaration earlier.
Then let's question the word impact here, because if there's 3 years in a row the same data because they did exactly nothing, what does that tell us about impact?
They had a very healthy. I always said if you measure, for example, customer satisfaction or customer loyalty, if it's at the right level, it's a bit like controlling your blood pressure. You need to check if the blood pressure is too high or too low. But if it's okay, then it's okay. But the other thing is, don't make a big thing out of that. It's just trying to find out if the overall blood pressure is okay. And then let's deep dive into the problem areas, because there are always problem areas. And then act on these problem areas.
So what data is, from your perspective, required to analyze these challenging areas?
Nice, easy question, Ralph.
Yeah.
From-
Actually,
It's from the book.
yeah. It's
The master wrote.
and then there's also a very easy answer that it depends.
Yeah.
Um,
That was Radio Erivan. I agree absolutely, 100%.
and I think it's a good mix. As if you want to solve problems
Yeah.
with customers, you need to ask your customers. Don't pretend that you would know what the customer wants. But
Das
also
ist-
don't misunderstand that the customer probably cannot tell you everything he wants because he even doesn't know. For example, in innovation research, you can always propose, this is an idea, do you like it or not? What does not work is, what would you want? It's not my
Yeah.
job, actually. If it's brilliant, I see it. This is, I mean, you can co-create things, no problem. But in reality, you need to always contrast your ideas with your customers, either in the real life process as it is implemented, and if it doesn't work, just change it. Or if you think in longer terms, then you need to contrast your ideas with the customer. This is crucial. Otherwise, you just, I mean, maybe you're so brilliant that you already know what all your customers are. Then next step, I would ask you to describe me all your different customer segments, how they feel, what they think, because you always have a bias of your own personality in there.
No,
So you even if I can interpret whatever number I see, I still get surprised by research results because I probably would not have thought that it would be this way, or it has changed already. And what we saw in the pandemic, that many different clients really changed in the way how they interact with the companies, and they also want to have probably different needs. And now, at least here in Europe, with the economic situation, again the needs changed, and this has nothing to do directly with your personal COVID experiences. It has something to do with your personal economic experience. So you need to be very close to your clients to understand maybe that a premium product right now is not the best thing to sell, at least in most of the markets.
Great point.
excellent point to hook in with the part of the differences in data usage in the States, Europe, and other hemispheres. How are they utilizing it? What are your experiences on that?
Actually, I had also global roles. I was global head of CX, and I traveled through all the different regions in the world. There was not Europe with GDPR, and even more Germany is the most rigid country I ever saw for customer experience management. This is not extremely helpful because you cannot link. For example, for many years, market research companies were not allowed to make personalized interviews. But this is necessary if you want to link internal data with customer feedback. This has changed over time, and you found workarounds and whatever. In the US, in the UK, this was never an issue. For that reason, certain developments started there much earlier.
Yeah.
Also, customer experience management, the idea of managing customer expectations linked to internal processes, but also to research results, came from there. And we don't need to speak about what's going on in countries like Dubai or in countries like China. The downside of this is that I personally still prefer to live not in China, because everything is so transparent, because they made the most out of what they could do with these personalized data. And also in the US, there is a movement of people who said, I don't want that. I want to share everything I have. And I think we don't have an answer yet. Where is the optimal point of privacy and when we are beyond that?
I'm not sure if the idea here is that Americans want to share all the data we have. I think most of us are just too dumb to realize how it's going to be used against us. It's like, oh, sure.
Yeah, but don't think that we in Europe are much more intelligent, actually, because we share that very broadly on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on whatever. And only because that happened, then also some of the authorities became a bit more relaxed, because this forms part of daily life. I share my voice with Amazon just to make my smart homework. I share my face with Apple just to open my iPhone easier. Maybe I'm also a bit dumb, because there are people who said you're stupid, you're crazy doing that. So people have the tendency to use everything that makes their life easy. And this is true in the States, and this is true in Europe, and this is true in China. And if you don't have a legal framework around that maybe prohibits certain things, even if it would be a bit more easy, then everything what can be done will be done. But if you think that in Germany we still use fax machines in the Deutsche Bundestag, which we found out in the pandemic, because this is for sure to avoid certain, maybe also to avoid very complicated data protected processes to share information, then there's always an upside and a downside. But I think what we see in totalitarian countries, what you can do if you have access to all this information, then we also should be a bit careful with what we wish for.
Yeah, and we can be quite confident that the Chinese do not any longer rely on fax technology, so we are quite safe on there. It's like if we look smoke signs and drum signals, even more safe, because they don't have the reach till China. But that's not the approach if we look for our health data, which was also collected on that very slow way. That was not beneficial to our, let's say, whole community of health-seeking citizens. Yeah.
And in general, you just said, and bring Christie's comment up again, because it quotes it quite well. It's an exchange of value, right? So one needs to be willing to also pay the price.
Yeah, but sometimes you don't know what price you pay. For example, if you're a drug addict, and it's very easy to get, for example, crystal meth here very close to the Czechoslovakian border, but the price you pay, you are not aware when you take that. And it helps you, maybe it's easy to get, and it solves you, it seems that it solves you a problem. Yes, but on the other hand, many problems that are solved by Google Maps were solved before Google Maps as well. I personally I'm the same type of guy. I mean, I love technology. I use everything. But I have to admit that some things I'm using just because I can do it. And I could do it also differently.
Agreed. makes more than one. And right now, so this is actually where I wanted to get to. This, you sometimes don't know the price. And we just recently had a very good example for upping the price without really notifying people, which is just stopped down. Well, talking TikTok, they changed their privacy policy, or wanted to change their privacy policies, by claiming legitimate interest for basically whatever they are doing. So, which leads us to Yeah, well, now that we are drifting into privacy, which leads us into the question, basically, where do legitimate interests start and stop? Where do they end, basically?
I stay away from that topic because there's a legislation,
Which is fuzzy, yeah.
and this is it's really difficult. I'm quite sure that I would stop later than it is stopped in German law. On the other hand, I
Okay.
also don't know all the consequences. And for example, I see if as I live in both, I live in two countries. If I see the health system in Spain so much better organized than the German system, because when you have there's this electronic health information simply saved, and if you're on holiday, the doctor in the holiday resort can have access exactly to all your health history. When you have an accident and you come into an hospital, then they have immediate access to your health history. And here it's everything so complicated. Now we introduce the electronic prescription. How do you say it? It's elektronische Rezept, electronic
Prescription is right.
Yeah.
prescribe. Yeah.
Prescription sounds right. Yeah.
And it will take decades until everybody will use it quite as normal, just as it took decades until people moved from cash money to credit cards. And they only did that now because of the COVID pandemic, because otherwise we still would go on with cash.
I think electronic medical records are one of my favorite innovations of the past 30 years or so.
If you have a legal system around that avoids that an insurance company can have a look at it in order to calculate their insurances. I mean, maybe Americans are more used to the idea that I don't have an insurance for my health.
Don't get me started on American insurance.
Yeah, but I think for with a European history, I would find it quite. I find it really important to have a health insurance, that it's not a matter of money if I get served by a doctor or not.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I understand that there is a price to that, price tag. And if this price tag is calculated because you have access and you cannot even say no, then I would not want to have health files available for everybody.
Right.
Or you can also calculate.
Now you tell us, Christy, what is an EMR, because I'm honest.
Electronic medical records.
I already wondered.
is just on top of
you're
things.
playing in my space. I say, well, no, I don't even know where your
Love you,
space is, Kristen.
So, but back to success and
Okay.
what is success in CX? I mean, we have
Very, very simple. This is very, 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 very simple. Success is when your customers stay as long as possible, when your customers recommend you to others, and when your customers buy, when you have the right customers for your company that fit well to the values and the products and what you can really offer to clients. And that is success. If that goes down, if you sell less because people don't like your products, then you're not successful. When you disappoint people in your services, then you're not successful, or you could be more successful if you would do it better. And this is the reason why you do customer experience management. You want to make the experiences of customers better. That's simple. That you did that even in a time when you did not call it customer experience management.
Let me yank the chain a little. I mean, we had that conversation as a CX Changer talk recently, but let me yank it in spite of that. So if you tie CX success to better sales, then how do you tie the better sale to a CX initiative and not to, well, that's a new product, which is just so far better than the competition's?
But that is customer experience management, in my understanding. If you're able to create a product that fits so much better to the needs of the customer, then your innovation manager made an excellent job in customer experience management. Because this, if you really look at customer experience management, it's about running a company. Running a company based on on your customer understanding. That is customer experience management. It covers all the areas. Innovation, user experience design on the website, process management, customer service. It is all in there. But the final criterium, if you want to, you see, repeat business, cross-sell, upsell, advocacy. That is...
so what you basically said, that all this is nothing because there's only one thing: customer experience management.
No, I'm saying if you take the idea seriously that you want to put the customer in the focus of whatever you do, which, honestly speaking, should be the job of a good entrepreneur, because what would be the alternative? I put all the money I can earn in the center of everything I do, then you probably don't have happy customers, and maybe it works short term, it never works long term. So this is, and because many companies forgot that, or the bigger the company is, the easier it is to lose sight of exactly this idea. If you're a very small company, you notice that immediately. If you're just an independent consultant, and if you disappoint 5 clients, then you will find it very difficult to find the next 5. In a big company, the responsibilities somehow are stuck somewhere. For that reason, you brought in the new idea. Look, who do we serve? It's not 15 years ago, it was shareholder value. And this is basically the overall notion that if our shareholders are happy, then I did a good job. No, it's not exactly. You did a good job if your customers are happy, because then you can make your shareholders happy. And it's also a good idea to make your employees happy, because then they are in a better position to make the customers happy, which makes then your shareholders happy. And this idea is the value profit chain that exists also already for I don't know how many years, 40 years, 30 years. Hesketh, Sasser, Schlesinger, I wrote it down because I always forget names. But and also this is not, let's not make that all these things super big. It's quite common. It's quite a lot of common sense, and typically common sense leads to the best results.
Well, it's common sense, but people want to see numbers to back up the common sense. We've been looking at doing a study on the role of employee experience for the longest time, either doing the study ourselves or convincing someone else to sponsor it. Common sense would say that happy employees, motivated employees, empowered employees make your business run better and improve your profits, and all of those other things. They make your customers happier. But then you have people who say, where are the numbers to prove it? People like Esteban Kolsky, whom we love, but Mr. Digital Pestilence is not a big fan of the common sense without proof. And to some extent, he's right.
But then just make a mental experiment. What would be the alternative? Unhappy employees.
Amazon works fine.
Working in the warehouse.
Depends a bit where you work. And Amazon has very customer-centric processes in place where it creates value to the customer. Maybe they don't treat all their employees well.
Just sticking to the example. So you said happy employees are necessary. Well, there's a very successful counterexample.
Yeah, but this is only, and even that doesn't work for me, because if they go on strike, then the logistic chain also breaks. So if you make them too unhappy, then they go on strike. And this is what happened around Christmas in some of the Amazon warehouses here. And a huge company also does not treat every employee equal. Then it's also a question of moral, of ethics, that you simply don't treat people bad. This does not mean that you need to make everybody super happy. But there are, for example, what I never understand, how you could treat people in contact centers or in customer service just based on very hardcore economic numbers that see them just as a cost center.
Yeah.
This is so incredibly stupid and counterproductive because they are a direct touch point to your clients. And this is where the value chain works. And I can tell you, when we had clients where the contact center or the customer service center was one of the key issues to fix, they worked under horrible conditions. And it was just as a cost factor, it did the job because it was cheap. But for the customer relationships, it harmed them so much that it costs. If you just remember, if you lose one client, typically it's in almost any industry, it's more expensive to win a new one than to keep an old one.
Yeah.
How much more expensive it is, it really depends a bit. But how stupid is that to save just a few pennies or cents or whatever, and increasing significantly the risk? For that reason, also the complaint management processes need to be perfectly orchestrated, because then you can even win back people. You can even make them happy because they see a stress situation. And I think the majority of the companies got that. What now will be interesting, when is the handover between a machine and a contact center agent? And what kind of contact center agent do we need then if the handover is much later because the very simple things are handled somehow with a chatbot, for example? We don't know. One of you reads. I get confused.
Just bringing that in. This is it's basically a side discussion, but it's quite interesting because it's about what the customer needs, and you made that point as well. It's not about making the shareholders happy. Making the shareholders happy is a consequence of making the customer happy. So means business success is a consequence as well. I very much advocate that thought as well. So, but coming back to the chain to be yanked. So best product is not necessarily it as well. So there's this famous company that is around here, quite big, starts with an M, that in the 90s, 80s and 90s was extremely successful in copycatting successful products and then pushing the competitor out of the market with something that was at that time rather inferior to the original product. So how is that CX? Because when we came to you're making.
Could you just shed a bit more light on the M? Because I don't know.
It was on the golden M and thought a French fry and a burger.
It's not McDonald's. It's not McDonald's.
Cool.
It's a software company around where I live.
In Redmond, Washington.
Yeah.
You know
so they have been extremely successful in pushing out competition with products that at that time have been inferior, functionally inferior today, usability inferior.
Are they inferior today? I think it's not
so
easy.
The other ones don't exist anymore, right?
Just look.
Well, Apple took a huge share, but I think there is another aspect we should not misunderstand, and this is again a question of legal and societal frameworks. If you allow monopolies, then you will not have the optimal customer experience. So if you avoid monopolies, sooner or later, you will have someone who delivers a better customer experience. Will he be the winner? I don't know, because sometimes, Champions League is also dominated by a few soccer clubs. They simply have much more money. In Germany, we would say money shoots goals. It's if you have enough money, you can also influence markets in a way that has nothing to do with customer experience management. But if there is competition, then there is always room for someone who creates better customer experiences than the big one. At the same time, the smaller company is, the more you are in a niche, the easier it is to meet exactly the needs of those customers who see you and who select you over the big one. If you're a big company, it's really difficult to deliver exceptional customer experiences. Maybe something like IKEA works somehow. I mean, but there are not so many companies that work. What works is you have a very small niche, you're very special, and you understand exactly the customer needs. You're successful. Not in the dimensions of Microsoft, not in the dimensions of Amazon, not in the dimension of Marriott. And then there are these other companies that maybe do not make their customers extremely happy, but they make them happy enough that they don't go to another one who makes them happy enough. They just manage their processes.
Okay, so now I totally agree. Still yanking further. So now we are talking platform economies.
Yeah.
So what you are basically saying is this should not be allowed.
No,
because a platform, what is a platform economy? Basically, is a winner
platform
takes it all.
economy where just one platform exists is a monopoly,
Yeah,
and the monopoly should not be allowed.
Yeah, well, platform economies tend to allow only two, basically, mostly. The other ones tend to
I know that
insignificant.
for an investor,
Yeah.
it is a logical consequence. The winner takes it all.
Mhm.
But it's our society and it's our legal system that says there is nothing like just one winner. Because at the end of the day, if he has one, he will not do anything to improve. That is why we need competition. And so I'm a huge fan of I did partner management at Kantar. So we tried to buy in competences we did not have to make a better offer.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe in that. And in the IT area, it's now so easy to combine different specific capabilities to deliver something that is better than what you had without them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if there is just one player in the market, he needs to address all the customer segments there are, which means there will be people who are okay. There will be people who said it could be much better, but there is no alternative. And then there are a few dumb people who said this is the best thing it is. I accept it. I'm happy. I don't need anything more.
Yeah. No,
And I'm just against this. I don't want to accept that we need to live in monopolies in order to be successful. Yes, from an investor's point of view, it is the case. But this is the reason why there is something like competition law.
No, which is a good thing to have. Which I fully agree.
If there's no competition, none of us have jobs.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing to talk about.
Yeah. I couldn't ask this type of stupid questions.
The other aspect is that even oligopolies do have their dangerous aspects. So it's not only the monopoly which is critical, but it's also if you have only like GAFA or other conglomerates which are slightly have cartel touch to move on and have their breakfasts together to combine their thinking about who will have how much market share in the next quarter.
Yeah, but for example, I was working with all commercial vehicle manufacturers in one single study in Kantar. This was really interesting because actually everybody shared what customers thought about them. And we were very clear in the protocols what to touch, what not to touch, which questions to ask, which questions not to ask. On the other hand, no one of the individual manufacturers would have spent that much money to have that high data quality
Yeah.
to really understand what clients want and what makes an Iveco client different from a Volvo client, from a Scania client, from an MAN or a Mercedes client. And for that reason, I think you can also cooperate in an, now you would argue, is that already an oligopoly or not? But we're coming quite close to that in the truck industry.
Okay.
At least in some markets.
When we had our, let's say, advisory board meetings on the CRM Expo, the show I was on the advisory board and later the project manager, it was quite interesting to see that the cooperation between the competition was more or less a friendly reunion with a common target we had together. We want to spread the news to the market, to the potential customers, and there was a large enough market. And an interesting other observation was at these times, females ruled the market in marketing size, such as all the decision-making ladies were dictating where to move on with the topics. Yeah, that was quite early, an interesting matriarchal-like experience. Yeah. Anyhow, there was a lot more empathy in these female-driven rounds, where we discussed a lot more openly and very vividly to new topics, such as the human being in the middle of our interests, Mensch im Mittelpunkt, was such a topic we decided in one of these advisory board meetings by just brainstorming and drove with it for several years as one of the mottos from the conference. Saying that, it is interesting to see if employee experience and empathy are having an impact on our customer experience. What do you think on that?
Oh, now I thought these. Now I take these three words and sort it again. First thing, empathy.
Yeah,
empathy is a very interesting construct, because empathy, everybody thinks a person needs to be empathetic to understand the other. Yes, nice. What I think is even more important, an organization needs to have something like an organizational empathy. An organization needs to have systematic processes to really listen and to understanding their customers. Frankly speaking, this is also just marketing, because in the past you would have said it's market research or insights or whatever. But I'm really convinced an organization that says, I don't give a shit what my customers think, is not empathetic. It will not act customer centric. So the first thing is, I need to be open and willing to understand and feel what my customer really wants. And this is true in B2B as much as in B2C. And if a person is empathetic, this helps to create this maybe also helps to create these insights. Not everybody needs to be really empathetic to create the insights, but at least those who are less empathetic need to be forced to listen to what the customer wants. That's for me the empathetic piece. And what was the employee piece? What would you need to start around employee?
It's again that I love to see what you had in the quote for the service profit organization, the three fantastic gentlemen. You quoted so nicely that we four believe, by not even having enough numbers to prove it, that a good employee experience is helping in a better customer experience, and empathy in the mindset, to put Christie's quote on here, is not disturbing there. Yeah?
No, absolutely not. What still probably stays an open question is, what is a good employee experience? Because I've done a lot of employee research as well, and I did the workshops afterwards. When you meet teams and you say, look, we found that as a problem in your team.
Yeah.
I explain to you why this will not go away, because there are other processes. And if we cannot change this, what do we take next where we can make a different process, or where we can create different structures that help you to make better decisions? For example, if you have a lot of legal regulations to complete a process, if you have a life insurance, that is really complicated, or if you claim a life insurance, this is difficult for the customer. This is also difficult for the employees. And if you say no, then you feel unhappy because you cannot make the client happy. The solution is not making all the clients happy. The solution is to change those things that can make the process a bit smooth, and to make very clear what are the things you simply need to accept, because probably an employee can be motivated to do a good job if he accepts certain things he cannot change, but at the same time gets Wertschätzung. Oh, what's the word in English?
Recognition.
Pardon?
Recognition.
Recognition for me sounds a bit like I can also give you money as a recognition, but recognition is
validation.
Pardon?
Validation.
Respect.
It's a bit more like respect. Look, I understand your situation. Also, as a boss, I understand your situation. I try to explain to you maybe parts of the situation you don't understand, and then let's create something within what is possible. Then you feel valued as a person.
Appreciation.
Yeah,
Team
danke.
appreciation.
There's one, yeah.
That is, I think, actually it's feeling valued as a person and as someone who can create, to a certain extent, its own environment. What it is not is a wish list.
Yeah.
That is also a classical mistake in employee research, that you create wish lists and then you have a workshop and say, look, wouldn't it be nice to have that? Wouldn't it be nice to have that? Wouldn't it be nice to have that? And you have always, the majority of you wants to have more holidays. The majority wants to have more salary. I mean, I don't get paid perfectly. I don't get paid perfectly for
Bye,
the
Christy.
effort I bring.
See you next time.
Thank you. Everybody feels underpaid. I felt underpaid. I know people who were heavily overpaid who felt underpaid, because money is not a good topic for these things. But you say it takes endless to get a decision for a certain process. This is something you can ask, and then you have a workshop where you work exactly on that, because maybe you can change that, or at least you look at the process and you say, look, certain things you cannot change. Then the other one is maybe not that unhappy, but you always need to work on those things that really can be managed, not on wish lists. And a happy employee is probably one where the boss tries to make his life as easy as possible, not necessarily pay him as much as possible. If you have a working environment where it's as easy as possible to do a good job, this is what most people appreciate most.
Okay. As a wrap, so as we did our hour, we do not want to dig too deeply into other people's time, appreciating their value, valuing their time, which is a kind of empathy as well. What I'd like to get some famous last words out of you, answering the question, what is the key foundation to generating great CX? One thing.
Love people.
Wow.
Aww.
Cool, no? That is.
nice.
I didn't prepare that, but I just thought that would be a nice one. Huh? This would be something for the books, yeah.
And
But
we already spoiled
frankly
it.
speaking, I really believe that.
Yeah. So, okay. Love people. The key foundation of great CX. In 2 words.
If you don't love people, you
perfect.
cannot create great CX.
Yeah. No.
You will treat your employees bad. You don't give a shit to your customers. And even your investors do not really matter.
Yeah.
Real rocket science. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks a lot.
It's been a great pleasure, and thank you for listening to. This went from A to B to C, but It was fun.
Excellent.
For me, it was fun. I hope for the others.
For us too. Thank you very much for joining
Thank
us.
you very much.
Thanks for joining, and thanks for everybody who is still there. See you next time with another great topic.
Thank you.